All right, well, back in 1983, which I recognize was 40 years ago, so none of you were alive except for some of your small group leaders, not all of them, some of them. T-Money, you probably remember this very well because you were alive back then, right? You were not two. You were older than two. There was a campaign that released that was called Friends Don't Let Friends Drive Drunk. Nice job. See, it's done its job. It is still around. Maybe you've seen that in the DARE program. Friends Don't Let Friends Drive Drunk. It was a public service announcement that does what it says it does. It's like it was promoting safe use of alcohol and not let people get behind the wheel after they have drank alcohol. And so the idea behind it was meant to help people to look out for their friends, right? And so since then, 40 years later, you've heard that slogan, but you've also heard or maybe have seen the memes that are different and have come from that, right? You've seen other things like friends don't let their friends fill in the blank, right? And so I came up with some, and I'm pretty sure these are going to fall flat on their face, but I'll say them anyway. I've seen ones that say friends don't let their friends use Internet Explorer, okay? Because like it's like Abby laugh, thanks, all right? Guys, friends don't let their friends skip leg day. I've heard that one, right? Okay. It goes for you too, okay? Friends don't let friends use Comic Sans as a font, all right? Friends, I've heard this a lot. Friends don't let friends miss move. Yeah, all right. Thank you, Heath. That's what I needed right there, okay. Or, whatever it is. Actually, in your small group tonight, that's going to be the first question that you discuss. Friends don't let friends fill in the blank. What would you say? What would be the answer so you could be thinking about that? But the idea is that friends look out for each other, right? Friends are supposed to look out for each other. We all want people to look out for us. We all want someone in our corner. We all want to be the type of friends and have the type of friends that not only have our back, but also care enough about us to say something or do something when it is appropriate, right? We all want to have that type of friends. We all want to be that. But here's the tension that I think that I feel, maybe you feel from time to time, is this. It's natural to take care of yourself. It takes intentionality to care for others. It comes natural to us, you all know this because you're human beings, to take care of yourself, but to actually take care of others or to look out for others, it takes a little bit of intentionality. That doesn't come naturally to everybody. Being a great friend, I think, an emphasis on great, being a great friend doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't just happen naturally. And friendship is like one of the most important things in your life right now. As a teenager, I know this. There are not many other things in your life that are more important than your friends. Like who's your friends? What are they doing? What things that you're involved in? Friendship is one of the best experiences that you will have in this world. The friends that you have now, the friends that you will make when you leave high school, go to college or military or whatever you go to next, the friends that you will make when you are older adults. It's all great. It's all wonderful. And if you want to go places with your friends, which is what this series is about, I want you to pay attention tonight because what we're going to talk about tonight really sets the tone and the foundation for a great friendship and how to look out for each other. Some people think that friendship actually does come naturally, which I think it does. Some of us are actually really good at like making friends. Like, I don't know if you list that on a resume or something. I'm great at making friends. But for others, maybe you are in here tonight and you kind of feel like that's not me. It doesn't come naturally. I actually have to work really hard at making friends or to maintain a good friendship with people. And the truth is that you've got to be intentional about being a good friend. What we're going to talk about tonight as we start this is that a good friend or a great friend never misses an opportunity to care for someone else or for their friends, to care. And I want to break it down. By the end of the night, you're going to see kind of what I mean by that and how to actually start living this out. It's also important that you know from the very beginning over the next couple of weeks that what we're going to look at is how Jesus modeled friendship, okay? There's a lot of ways that we can look at the Bible and say how so-and-so was a good friend to so-and-so, and there's ways to do that. What we're going to be doing over the next 3-4 weeks is in the Gospels, seeing how Jesus treated and cared for people and how we can make that as a part of our lives as well. So if you have a Bible or you like to open up YouVersion, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 14 tonight. And I just want to say this again to make sure everybody knows. If you open up YouVersion, you go to the events page, you could see all the text, all the points, all that kind of stuff, and that way you could go home and ace the quiz to your parents of, hey, what did you learn tonight, okay? So that's a new version. And so here's what we're going to do. Jesus actually had a friend, he was actually a relative, named John the Baptist, okay? And Jesus and John the Baptist were really close. I think most people believe that they grew up together, spent a lot of time together. But as they started in ministry, John the Baptist, you may know this from reading your Bibles or reading the Gospels, he was the one that prepared the way for Jesus, right? You remember this? Is that before Jesus started his ministry, John the Baptist was actually the one out proclaiming the good news, saying the Savior's coming, prepare the way, all this type of stuff. And so Jesus and John the Baptist were close. In fact, most of you know this as well, is that John the Baptist was actually the one that baptized Jesus, right? And so they had this close, intimate relationship, and we see that also throughout the Gospels, some unique opportunities and moments that they have. But here's what happens right before Matthew chapter 14 of what we're going to read tonight. You may know that John the Baptist actually didn't get to live and see all of Jesus' ministry. As a sick party trick at a birthday party for Herod's household, John the Baptist was actually brought in and beheaded. And he lost his life in the middle of Jesus' ministry. And so in this moment, Jesus' disciples find out about this. Jesus learns what happens. And what we're going to read next is the next thing that happens in this story. So I just want you to put yourself in the story, right? Jesus has lost, for all we know, probably his best friend or someone very, very close to him, right? Very traumatic thing. Loses his friend. He was killed. He was murdered by Herod. And so this is what we're going to read, okay? So Matthew chapter 14, we're going to start in verse 13. Here's what it says. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. And when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and he broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples. The disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and they were satisfied. And the disciples picked up the 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides the women and the children. All right, so there it is. And you've heard that story before, I'm guessing, right? It's the iconic story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. It's a really cool moment where they get the fish and the bread and Jesus multiplies it and everybody's fed. And it's great. But tucked into the context of what was going on in Jesus' life are some really important truths that we can learn from him about caring for people and about friendship. And so I want to give you follow with me for a second. I want to give you 2 ideas of how Jesus models this, and then I'm going to end with 3 very practical tips for you on how to be a great friend and to care for people, okay? So stay with me. The first one is this, is that Jesus modeled compassion, okay? He modeled compassion. Don't forget what Jesus was just going through. Losing a friend was difficult. Learning of the passing of John the Baptist was, I'm guessing, difficult for Jesus to hear and to move on. That's why in the text, if you read it, it says that Jesus went off to a solitary place. Like he left everything that he was doing and tried to get alone when he heard this. It's the reason why, if you have a job, when you grow up and you have a job, if you lose someone close to you, most places will give you what's called bereavement, right? Where you get a couple days to soak that in and to deal with a funeral and to recover, right? Most jobs will do that, will give you bereavement days when you lose someone close to you. And Jesus didn't have an employer, so he didn't have that. But he removed himself. He tried to get away because it was difficult. But here's what's interesting is that Jesus cared for those when he even had his own things going on. Even when he was dealing with grief and probably a little bit of pain, you notice what happened. Even in his grief, The text tells us the crowds followed him. Can you imagine Jesus just trying to get away, just trying to leave everything because he just lost one of his best friends, and the crowds see him leaving and they just follow him. And they just won't leave him alone. And so you notice what happens is that even though the crowds follow him, he cares for them. And so it says this: when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and he healed their sick. Now, if you've been to Engage very long, you may have heard me teach on this before, but if you're new here, this will be some new information. This word right here in the middle, compassion, is such an important word to understand. What we understand about this word, it's this Greek word, splagnizomai. Can you say that with me? Splagnizomai. Now, if you go home and tell your parents that you learned some Greek tonight, you could tell them that, or you could say, I want splagnizomai for dinner, and you could confuse them. But splagnizomai is this word for compassion. It means to be moved on the inward parts. Okay, so it means like to have this sense of like there's something going on inside of me that I feel this on the inside of me and I'm moved to compassion. That's what this word means. It means that Jesus felt this deep inward compassion, this feeling for these people. But here's what I want you to notice. At this point, this was not about their hunger. The story's about Jesus feeding the 5,000, right? That's how we know the story. Jesus feed the 5,000. He had compassion on them. But here's what it says. He had compassion on them when he saw the large crowds and he healed their sick. This was not about their hunger. Jesus had compassion on the state that they were in. In fact, this story is actually recorded in all four Gospels, okay? And so if you were to flip through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you're going to find it in all of them. So Mark says it like this. It's very similar. Mark says when Jesus landed, saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them. Splagnizomai, same word. Because, and he says a little different, they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he doesn't say, because of he saw the sick people or anything. He notices the state that they were in. They were lost because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So Jesus had compassion on them. Luke describes it like this, a little differently. Luke says, when the crowds learned about it and they followed him, he, Jesus, welcomed them and spoke to them about the kingdom of God. And so that word welcomed is this idea, this word of, it's like hospitality, embracing them with hospitality. The idea here that I'm trying to communicate to you is that Jesus modeled compassion for all of us, even when he had his own things going on. And if you fast forward to the end of the story that we're all familiar with, Jesus showed this perfectly when he went to the cross. Even in the midst of being beaten and crown of thorns and all the things that went on, being whipped. I don't know if you guys remember this, but Jesus was actually flogged before he had to even carry his cross up. They whipped him in his back with a flesh-scourging weapon, and then he made him carry his cross. I mean, in the midst of all of that, and as the hands nailed, he's on the cross. Why was he there? For all of us. He had compassion on all of humanity for our state, even in the midst of what he went through. And so this is all modeled by Jesus. And so I think we can learn a lot from this idea of compassion, but I want to continue because I really want to make this end in a way that makes sense for you, okay? So not only did Jesus model compassion, but he also modeled care. And these two things, they're a little bit different, okay? Jesus modeled care for all of us. The miracle here is not that he just healed their sick, okay? That is a miraculous thing. In fact, it's pretty spectacular. The miracle that we know, and what we call this, if you look at the heading of your Bible probably, is Jesus feeding the 5,000. That's the miracle, right? It's the food that he made appear out of these baskets that really wasn't there. And we could spend a lot of time talking about this, but to be honest with you, I'm not smart enough to explain to you how this worked, okay? I don't think that anybody can replicate this. It was a miracle of Jesus, but there's something that's more compelling if you dig a little bit deeper, that's happening here, and that's the care that Jesus provides. He wanted others, he wanted to help, right? He wanted to help the situation, and he invited others to do it as well. A lot of Jesus' miracles, like healing people, he just heals them, right? He puts mud on their eyes, or he tells them to go wash themselves, or he just heals them, tells them to pick up their mat. Jesus does it himself. But in this miracle, I don't know if it's because there's so many people or because his disciples were there and a part of the problem or brought the issue to him, Jesus invites them to help with it. Now, it's so easy in your life, stay with me for a second, it's so easy to stay in your lane and to worry about your problems, right? It's very easy to do that, right? That goes back to our thing that we said at the beginning, that's It's easy to take care of ourselves. It takes intentionality to care for others. It's easy to stay in your lane and to focus on you. In fact, that's what the disciples did, right? What did they do when they learned that all the disciples or all the people were hungry? They said, Jesus, send them away. Send them back to the towns and the villages so they could feed them themselves. We can't feed them, right? That's what they did. They stayed in their lane, but they wanted to send them out. So it's easy to focus on yourself. It's much harder to focus on others and to look out for them, which is what Jesus did. And so instead of sending them away, Jesus models this care for them because not only did he have compassion to help, but he asked the others to participate in the process. I love this part of the verse. I don't know if you recognize this, but here's what it says. And Jesus responds to them. He says, they don't need to go away. You give them something to eat, right? Which is like, Jesus, we just told you we only have like a little bit of bread and a little bit of fish. We can't feed it's probably more than 5,000, right? 5,000 plus women and children. We can't feed them all. Why are you telling us to do something? We can't do anything. That's why we asked you to help. But what Jesus is really communicating here, and this is so important, I'm going to put it on the screen. What he's really communicating here is this. Jesus wanted them to not only just to reflect his compassion, but to rely on his resources. They wanted him, all the disciples, Jesus wanted them to reflect the compassion because they saw the issue and the need, but they didn't see how they could help. So he wanted them to feel the compassion that he had, but then to rely on his resources to fix it. Don't misunderstand me. Jesus didn't ask any of us to do miracles, I don't think, okay? Those were signs and wonders that were able to point to Jesus, to glorify God, and to prove he is who he said he was. But I do think if we can make the connection to our life, that he wants us to be a part of the process of caring and helping other people as well, to be a part of his work. Because here's the truth I believe as well, if you follow with me, is this. Jesus not only meets needs in us, but he wants to meet needs through us. He not only helps your greatest need of sin, and he gives you peace, and he gives you comfort. He can not only meet those needs in us, but he also wants to meet needs of other people through us as well. And I could tell stories, and we've done this before, of how some of you have done that, how you've stepped up, you've met needs of other people in the community or at Fairfax or whatever it is. And I love those stories, but I want to close by making this kind of practical because all of this to say, let's bring it back to friendship, is this. To be a good friend, you've got to care for each other. You have to care. You have to have the compassion, and you have to have the care for other people. So to make this practical, on some level, to be a great friend, the question is, are you the type of friend a good friend who cares, or are you the type of friend that looks out for yourself? Now, all of us, on some level, we look out for ourselves the majority of the time. But to be a good or a great friend, we look out for the needs of others as well. So here are the three practical things. If you'd like to take notes, these are the things that are actually going to help you to put this into play. All right? Number one is this. How to do this right is to pay attention. Okay? So simple. Pay attention to your friends, what's going on in their lives. You've got to be willing to ask the questions about their personal life, about their home life, about their spiritual life, right? How are those things? How are you doing? Like really, you've got to be able to ask those questions. You have to be able to take note when your friends seem a little off or seem like they're struggling or seem like they're down, right? Because again, it's easy to stay in your own lane and to focus on your own life. It takes a little bit of intentionality to pay attention to your friends and to recognize when they sit in a circle when it looks like they could need some encouragement. The closer you are with someone, the better that you can do this. Let me give you an example. I can tell 9 times out of 10, when my wife comes home from work, I can tell exactly what type of day she had at work, okay? Because within the first 15 to 20 seconds, I can tell whether she's irritable or whether she came home fulfilled. My wife's a teacher, if you don't know, so she spends her whole day with 5th graders. It's not awesome sometimes, okay? But sometimes it is, okay? I don't want to discourage anybody who's a teacher who wants to be a teacher, okay? But I can tell what type of day she's had. In those moments where I'm like, oh, she's had one of those days, which seems to about happen half the time so far this school year, I have to take more of a lead, and I have to say, okay, I'm going to have to step up on dinner. I'm going to have to step up on homework with the kids. I need to do what I can do to help her because I'm paying attention. I'm paying attention to the signs, to the caution flags or whatever you want to call it. I'm paying attention to how she's doing, right? And you can do this with your friends as well, but by just looking and paying attention a little bit. Look what Philippians chapter 2, verse 4 says. You're probably familiar with this. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. What would it look like for you to sit in your circle tonight and just look people in the eye and just kind of see who's had a bad week, who needs a little bit of encouragement, who could I check in on? So this is really important. And in your groups tonight, you're going to talk about paying attention to others as a primary way to care for your friends. Number 2 is this. I'm going to do these next 2 very quickly. It's to offer support. It means to step in and to help where you need to help. Maybe sometimes it's sending an encouraging text or meme or Bible verse or whatever it is. Maybe it's bringing them a candy bar. When you notice and you paid attention, someone needs a little bit of help, step in and help. What problem in their life do they need help with right now that you can help solve, that you can be a part of? Just like the disciples got to be a part of feeding the 5,000, how can you help your friends solve their problems? And the third one, if everybody could listen to me for just a second, I want you to hear this. The third one is this, is a call for help. There could be sometimes in your life when you have a friend that needs help that's beyond your helping. As a high school student, you're probably not equipped to deal with addiction or abuse or depression or things like that. Maybe you can help, but maybe there are times where you see the signs, you've paid attention, you know what's going on, and you just need to ask for help from somebody else, from a small group leader, from an adult, from a parent, and I need you to know that's okay. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but I don't think I can gloss over this to say as a friend, there are times that when you pay attention and you see the support that they need, that it's just beyond your control as a friend, and you need to bring in somebody to help, okay? Here's the bottom line I want you all to understand is this. Friends care for each other by paying attention and offering help. That's what you do. That's how you become a great friend. That's how you care for other people. When you do this, when you start to do this, you start treating people the way that Jesus did, this very much could change your small group. It could change your family. It could change your friend group. I mean, who knows what could happen when you start paying attention and offering help. Let me give you a story to end, and then we'll wrap up, okay? Some of you guys know almost every week, I play an open gym basketball here with some guys. I'm one of the older ones out there now, so I have a different approach with how I treat people because there's some younger guys in their 20s or whatever that come in and play. But I enjoy it because not only is it some fun competition I love to play, but there's a weird sense of community because the same guys come almost every week, right? So much way you'd be at the Impact Center or whatever, like that when the same people gather in the same place weekly, you get to know people. And so some weeks it's really fun and great friendships, and some weeks there's just heated conversations, and like that's just kind of is what it is out there. But what I have learned is that when you start to get to know people, you can play a part in doing some of these things by just providing a little bit of care when you pay attention. So I had a friend in there that I got to know a little bit, and we became Facebook friends, and I got his phone number, and I would text him and stuff like that. And there was a time where he disappeared for a while, and then he came back, and when he came back, he was very different than I knew him before. And I noticed this, he's much more irritable and just kind of off to himself when talking to him about it. So I went up to him one time, I was sitting next to him on the bleachers out there, and I said, "Hey man, like, are you all right? Like, you just seems like you're struggling or like something's going on." I just said, that's really was my question. Are you doing okay? And in that moment, he opened up to me in a way that like I was not expecting. I was expecting like the common answer, right? Like, dude, yeah, I'm fine, right? Like that's what I was expecting. But he opened up to me about stuff that was going on in his life with it. One of his, like he has small kids and a relationship that he had and just some different stuff that I wasn't honestly prepared to like walk him through in that moment. But he just opened the door and started sharing stuff with me. And because of that, I had a follow-up process with him where I would text him and I prayed with him in that moment. And here's why I tell you that story. Is that a very small example? The story doesn't end where I took him to church and baptized him, okay? But the story is where I saw and I paid attention and I just asked, "How are you doing? How can I help? Can I pray for you?" And every once in a while I text him or I encourage him to come, and I don't know where it's going to lead, but I tell you that because I don't want to give you some great grand story about this amazing friend that I am, because sometimes the story for you as a student right now is just to pay attention and to check in on your friends. That's how you care for them. So with all of that said, I want to encourage you tonight in your groups to talk about this idea of what does it look like to pay attention to my friends and to step in and have compassion and care when it's necessary, right? Being a great friend isn't hard, but it doesn't happen by accident.